So, title of my talk is Glasgow Museums, What For? But before we can go into working out what our museums are for, first we need a little history lesson. So, for many centuries, Glasgow was a small, quiet, university cathedral city with not many inhabitants and not much attention. Then, in the 19th century, rapid expansion using engineering and technology to transform the city into one of the major cities in Europe. By the end of the 19th century, it had over 1 million inhabitants. It was known as the workshop of the world and the second city of the British Empire. It was a massive transformation of a city. Just a small indication of the grandeur of Glasgow. And it's hard to understand just how important, how big the engineering industry was in Glasgow. But to give some indication, we built 25% of the world's ships and 25% of the world's locomotives in this one city in Glasgow. It was quite phenomenal. You can just imagine the workforce and the facilities that were needed to create that industry. That was great. It worked for many decades, but after the Second World War, things began to change. The heart was literally ripped out of Glasgow. The engineering died away, shipbuilding collapsed. There was very serious problems in Glasgow. Depopulation. It was a city with problems. It was known for industrial unrest, civil unrest, gang violence, sectarianism, Protestants fighting Catholics, alcoholism. It was a dark, dirty, and violent place. That was the public perception, and a lot of it was based on reality. So, the city needed a new purpose, a new identity. And the city politicians decided that the way to go was to use culture and museums as a way to transform the fortunes of the city. Now, this wasn't based on nothing. There was a very strong tradition in Glasgow of having museums. So, in 1901, we opened Kelvin Grove, big main museum in Glasgow. It was designed because Glasgow was a city with big ambitions, and every big city needed a museum that reflected the status of the city. So they built a big museum. Now, in 1983, the city began to build on this tradition of museums in Glasgow, and we opened up the Burrell Collection. This was a collection of art that was collected by a ship owner, made lots of money running ships, and he collected art and donated it all to the city of Glasgow. For many years, it lay in store. It was too big to do anything. But in the 1970s, the city used this collection as a way to start the transformation of Glasgow into a city of culture and a city of museums. And it's hard to overestimate the importance of the Burrell Collection in the start of that transformation of the identity of Glasgow. And we have continued the tradition of building new museums and using the museums to create new environments and new destinations within the city. So this is the new Riverside Museum, opened up in 2011, which some of you visited a few years ago. Now, this transformation has been extraordinary. From a city of darkness and violence, we are now in the top 10 destinations in the world. It's a place to be. It's a place of vibrancy and excitement and culture. Now, there is a term that describes this, which is the Guggenheim or the Bilbao effect. Because of the Guggenheim in Bilbao, now it should have been called the Glasgow effect, because the people from Bilbao, when they were starting out the process, came to Glasgow and looked at the Burrell collection to find out how it was done. There is a Glasgow effect, but unfortunately that is something very different indeed. So, the Glasgow effect is an extraordinary high mortality rate within Glasgow. There is very low life expectancy among people who live in the poorer parts of the city. So Glasgow is a city of contrasts. Yes, we have the bright, shiny museums and international cultural tourism, but there is still a huge part of Glasgow which is desperate, essentially. Now, we know that museums can change lives. We know that participation in culture can make a difference to people. We know, for example, that museums and culture promote quality of life, brings measurable health benefits, and in some cases, increases longevity. Museums make you live longer. That's an amazing statement. So, with this knowledge, we have embarked on a programme of social engagement. So it's not just the shiny museums, but it is the people who visit the museums that are equally as important. So Martin Rowell from the British Council yesterday was commenting about the selfie culture and saying that people often think they're more important than the collections. Well, they are. Museums are nothing without the people. So, central to the new way that we are working is our new museum store. It's called the Glasgow Museums Resource Centre. Now, it is a building where we have 1 million objects, but it's not where those objects go to die. It is not a stale and boring place full of dust and dead objects. Instead, it is a vibrant, living environment where we welcome huge numbers of people into the stores. We provide access and we run programs of activities where people can learn and enjoy about the collections. So we run a number of programs using this has essentially become the headquarters of the museum service. So out of the resource centre, we run a whole range of different programs. We have learning. Every school child in Glasgow has been promised by the politicians that they will have at least one visit to a museum during their school career. We run programs of outreach. We take the collection out into the community. This is a knowledge transfer event where we've taken some of the Islamic collection to the mosque in Glasgow and we've captured the knowledge from the people who know about these objects. We run projects with young people. This is a young person's kind of a youth club of disaffected kind of teenagers who don't like to go to school, but with the power of museum objects, they've embarked on a learning program that's enabled them to use the collection to actually do something really interesting and novel with their lives. We run programs of inclusion. Glasgow is a city of great diversity now. We have huge migrant populations in the city, and we use our collections to bring people in, to look at our collections, and to explain the interconnectedness of all of our lives with our collections. We also take our collections out into the community. So we have a number of permanent community museums. The collection belongs to us, but the collection is curated, the displays are curated, and they're run by people in the communities. We help them, but it's largely their displays, their work, their effort, and their pride in their own museum. We also have a process of taking the collections in smaller form, in boxes, to all sorts of different parts of the community. So old people's homes, community centres, they can take a box of objects. We had a visit from the Kremlin Museum a few years ago, and we were trying to explain the whole process to them. And they just could not understand that we allow people to come, pick up a box of objects, and take it to their own community. We do not send an armed guard that the Kremlin thought we ought to do with the collection. We trust the people who are looking after, essentially, their collection. The whole collection of Glasgow Museums belongs to the people of Glasgow, and it's their right to use and to gain access to their collections. We're also running programmes in prisons, for example, where we're taking objects into prisons and using the power of objects, again, to help to transform people's lives in terms of rehabilitation of offenders. And it's proving very effective in terms of the transformation, the difference that just engagement with a more normal aspect of life can have for people who are locked up in prison. We are running programmes with, for example, mental health. So this is a project that we ran with a university where a group of people who are experiencing mental health worked with, again, museum objects to learn about sociology, and they gained a qualification in sociology through the university in partnership with the museums. We're taking the collection into hospitals. We have learnt that museum objects can have a serious, kind of powerful impact on people suffering from dementia. They can see familiar objects, and they can be used as a focus for engagement within their own facility. So this is an old people's hospital where we have taken our museum objects and put them on display. We also engage a lot with volunteers. Volunteering is a huge part of what we do. So we welcome over 380, I think it was last year, volunteers who work across a whole variety of different ways with the museum. They provide guided tours, they do research, they do all sorts of work for us. It tends to be divided between old people who have retired and want to put something back into society, and young people who want to gain skills to go and improve their employability and move into the workplace. So this is all very kind of new and exciting, and it's demonstrating the whole new museology, the Museums Association, Museums Changes Lives, and all of that. So it's all new, isn't it? Well, actually, it's not. It's what we have always done as a museum service. It's the whole philosophy of what I've just been explaining was there from the very start in the 19th century. Our founding father, in many ways, James Paton, said in the 1880s, essentially, that museums are there for everyone, for every single citizen in Glasgow. They're not elite institutions, they are museums for the people. And he had a vision that with the power of museums, he said, it will be a happy day for our cities when police rates fall and our prisons become deserted and museums, parks and libraries rise and these places swarm with instructed, happy and appreciative citizens. So that is the power of museums and culture to change people's lives, and that is the vision from the 1880s. That's not from the 2010s. So, just in conclusion, what I think we are doing in Glasgow is combining the Bilbao effect and the Glasgow effect into one kind of unified museum service. So without the economic impact and the cultural tourism and so on, we wouldn't have the capacity to be able to do the social impact side of things. And without the public engagement that we're doing, the museums would be big and shiny, empty shells that would have little value or meaning. So there we go. And with British punctuality. I think I'm now at 27 seconds left to go. So thank you very much.